Scare campaign, which I think actually discredited the effect of the other parties during the election. Conservative Party is a very responsible, realistic, moderate party, and we have put our policy on the table, and the electorate has voted in very large numbers for it, and I think we are now entitled to carry it out.
I just want to say one thing to Mr Kinnock. We just saw the recount at Glanford and Scunthorpe requested by Labour. Now that's a seat where steelworks have been shut down. Conservatives have held their seats in the West Midlands, Round Oak steelworks shut down. Now why is it that unemployment has not worked for Labour in this election?
The degree of hopelessness about it generated, I think very deliberately, the idea that it was because of the world slump, when that is demonstrably wrong, and the view that somehow there is waiting round the corner a recovery, which is also an entire fallacy. And we shall now have the chance to discover, in the worst possible way, whether our scares, so-called, were justified or not. And I think that we will find, to the tragic consequences of this country, that none of our scares were exaggerated, that all of the anticipated results of a Tory victory will come about, and this nation will plunge on every scale, social and economic.
We'll come back to this discussion, which is going on, I think, for the next 5 years. Martin has got some late results.
Well, Alistair, some more of the gains in detail that have pushed the Conservatives towards that huge majority. And first of all, in Stevenage, Tim Wood, who was only adopted 3 weeks ago, he has taken Stevenage with a majority of 1,700 and a swing to the SDP of 13.4%. In Batley Spen, Labour's Ken Woolmer, the spokesman on trade, is out. The Conservatives have taken that by 870 votes, a swing their way of 2.4%. In Bridgend, Peter Hubbard Miles, there was a big row over the choice of candidate there, but he won that and he's won the seat as well. His majority 1,300 and a swing his way of 6.7%. In Corby, William Powell has taken Corby, his majority 3,000 and a swing his way of 3.7%. That result just through. In Ealing North, Harry Greenway has taken that for the Conservatives. Hilary Benn, Tony Benn's son, running second, 6,000 votes behind, a swing to the Conservatives of 7.5%. In Edmonton, Ian Twin is home for the Conservatives, his majority just over 1,000, swing his way 2.3%. In Feltham Heston, Patrick Ground is home. Russell Kerr, the ex-chairman of the Tribune Group, failed to get that seat, and the Conservative majority there is 2,500, a swing their way of 5.7%. And in Newport West, that's virtually the old Abertillery seat. The Conservatives have taken that with a majority of 581, a swing their way of 4.5%. In Nottingham North, William Whitlock is out as MP, and the Conservatives, the majority is 362. And it would seem that things are going on down in Dizzy, it seems, has totally flaked out. I'm sure a lot of the rest of us here, sitting up through the night, might be tempted to do the same, watching the results come in. But Dizzy has very firmly given his verdict on what he thinks of the Conservative majority in this election. And he's just crashed out altogether. Now let's have a look at let's have a look at a few more of the results that might have made Dizzy so depressed. In Stockport, Tom McNally, Mr Callaghan's a former personal assistant, is pushed down to third place. The Conservatives have regained Stockport with a majority of just under 6,000. And in Derbyshire South, the Conservatives have taken Derbyshire South. Roderick McFarker, the Labour MP who defected to the SDP, pushed down to third place. The Conservative majority, 8,000, swing their way of 8%. And in Swindon, David Stoddard is out as MP. The Conservatives have taken that with a majority of 1,300, swing their way of 6.9%. And in Warwickshire North, Francis Maud, son of Sir Angus Maud, who has just retired at the end of the last Parliament after 30 years as an MP. The Maud name carries on in Parliament. The Conservative majority there, 2,500, swing their way of 5.4%. And in York, where Alex Lyon, as we saw earlier, is out to journalist Conal Gregory. And the Conservative majority there, 3,500, a swing their way of 4.2%. And we can look at some of the seats that Labour has gained. In Birmingham Erdington, Robin Corbett, who was MP for Hemel Hempstead up to 1979, he's taken that seat with a majority of 231, beating a Conservative candidate who was the son of a Birmingham bus driver. The Labour swing there, 2.2%. And just one more result. In Crewe Nantwich, as we saw earlier, Gwyneth Dunwoody has taken Crewe Nantwich very much against the trend by just 290 votes. A valiant victory for her there, and a swing to Labour of 3.5%. No doubt Labour wish that that could have been repeated and more in the rest of the country. Alistair.
Martin, we're waiting for news of the victor of the night, Mrs. Thatcher, the first Prime Minister to have a second full consecutive term of office since Lord Salisbury in 1900. And she's about to arrive at her count at Finchley, where, of course, she's been going since 1959 when she first won the seat. We've heard from Mr. Foote, rather tired Mr. Foote, not quite as tired as Dizzy, but we've heard from him that he has conceded, it is over, and Mr. Foote now faces his future. I don't suppose Mr. Foote ever really thought that he was going to be the leader of the Labour Party. Indeed, he had to be persuaded. Mr. Kinnock isn't here, Mr. Varley is here now. I think Mr. Foote indeed had to be persuaded by his friends to stand for the leadership. Is that not right, Mr. Varley?
I think that's certainly the case.
I think we've got now Mrs. Thatcher at Finchley. Michael Brunson.
We're still waiting for her to come into the actual declaration room, Alistair. We hear that she did, in fact, come out of the count room for a brief time. And she's now making her way through the building from the back. Great excitement here because everyone knows, in fact, that she has won. One or two other people having a bit of fun in this room, screaming Lord Such's party, for example. But we're all waiting to see the person who is going to be the next Prime Minister, or will continue to be the Prime Minister of this country. Now, Mrs. Thatcher has just been delayed, and we're not quite certain exactly where. Now, I can see Mrs. Thatcher now. She's over to the left. The applause is being given for some of the other candidates. There are a total of 11 candidates. And Mrs. Thatcher comes into the room at this moment. Coming through now, looking happy, knowing, of course, that she has won, that her party has won. Coming up to sit beside the returning officer, Councillor John Tiplady, the Mayor, who gets up now and is going to read the declaration.
Parliamentary election, 9th of June 1983, constituency of Finchley. The percentage of electors voting at the election for the constituency of Finchley was 70.37%. I, John Charlie Tiplady, returning officer for the constituency of Finchley, hereby declare that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows: Mary Helen Anscombe, Rail, not Motorway, Independent, 42. Margaret Jane Joachim, Liberal SDP Alliance, 7,763.
From the Alliance.
Anthony Joseph Newen, Ban Every Licensing Law Society candidate, 75. Lawrence Gregory Spiegel, Labour Party candidate, 10,302. Lord David Edward Such, official Monster Raving Looney Party, 235.
And now the important one.
Margaret Hilda Thatcher, Conservative Party candidate, 19,616. Brian Clifford Wareham, Party of Associates with Licensees, 27. David Alec
tail enders
Webb,
to come through here, but Mrs.
Anti-Censorship
Thatcher
Reform
has a
of the
majority
Obscene
there of
Publications Act
something approaching
28.
9,000.
Benjamin Collingham Wedmore, Bolano Blood Hunger 13. Anthony Peter Whitehead, Law and Order in Gotham City 37.
And the last of the tail enders.
Simone Joan Wilkinson, Women Life on Earth Ecology Party 279. And that the said Margaret Hilda Thatcher has been duly elected to serve as a Member of Parliament for the said constituency.
There we are, as expected, Mrs. Thatcher wins her seat, but she also knows that she has won the election, and she will shortly be making a speech.
I would ask Mrs. Thatcher to move the vote of thanks, and I also ask Lawrence Spiegel and Mrs. Jarcombe to support the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Returning Officer, on behalf of my fellow candidates, may I thank you and all your officials and the police for the very long hours which they put in during this election campaign and for the excellent way in which they have carried out their duties. May I also especially thank my own chairman, agent and supporters in this campaign.
And a slight disturbance going on as one of the other also-rans tries to make it. He's hustled away by the police.
Burden placed upon them this time,
This is
and
the
I am
anti-censorship
very
man.
grateful to them for the way in which they
Tried to
have
make a
fought
lunge
it.
at Mrs. Thatcher, but was restrained.
Whatever it may
being
be
taken
one's
up.
fortunes nationally, one's strength and inspiration comes from the support which one receives in one's local constituency. And may I say how very grateful I am to everyone in Finchley for that support, and how very proud and honoured I am to represent Finchley and Frown Bonnet once again. Mr. Returning Officer, may I add just two more things. First, it has been a rather exciting evening for some of us, and I have reason to think that we may have been returned to serve nationally for another period in government. May I say that I approach that term of office with a very great sense of responsibility and humility. It has been a historic election, and I'm very proud of the honour conferred on me. And finally, I just want to say thank you to my husband, Dennis, who has been absolutely marvellous throughout.
So there it is, Mrs. Thatcher acknowledging that she is going to continue as Prime Minister.
Yes, I would also like to thank the officers and staff of today's
Mr.
election.
Foote now is there.
And the local police who have been so courteous and who have organised the election so efficiently today. But I would also say that particularly like to thank my agent, Mr. Mick O'Connor, and the hundreds of workers in the Finchley Labour Party who have done so much to achieve such a good result for the Finchley Labour Party today. I would also say that a special responsibility devolves upon the Finchley Labour Party.
With news as we come back here that the Conservatives have held what used to be Ayrshire North and Bute. That's all been changed, but Mr. John Corry, who led the amendment to the abortion law, has held that seat rather against the boundary changes. Well, that's democracy. We saw that at Finchley, and I don't suppose there's a leader anywhere else who would have to take that kind of barracking. It happens to everybody. It happens to Mr. Foote in defeat. It happens to Mrs. Thatcher in victory. It's probably easier for her to accept in victory than for him in defeat. But that is democracy. You have all these other candidates. They all have their say and their way, and all their fans and supporters are there. But for Mrs. Thatcher, with the majority, we are now forecasting of 140 over all other parties. That probably is just like, well, water off a duck's back. And Mrs. Thatcher has done it, and didn't she let them know it? Peter.
We've got the David Steele result there now, Alistair. I don't know if it was flashed up on the screen before, but there's the detailed result. David Steele has held his seat at Tweeddale, Ettrick and Lauderdale, taking 58% of the vote, the Conservative 29%, Labour 8%, Scottish National Party 5%. The Liberal share is up 9.9%, the Conservative down 3.6%, Labour down 4.2%, and the Scottish National Party down 2.1%. A point perhaps that might interest Eric Varley over there is that Labour, the Alliance, have come second in 256 of the 534 seats declared when I had the latest computer printout done, which suggests that in large tracts of the country, the Alliance are now the opposition.
Well, I think we'd better wait and see exactly how it turns out. It depends what you mean by the Alliance, too. I think the Liberals have done extraordinarily well. I don't think the SDP has done all that well at all. And in fact, I always knew that when this alliance was founded that the Liberals, of course, would take the Gang of Four and the defectors from the Labour Party to the cleaners, and that's what's happened.
Well, I'll tell you, the Liberals have come second in 154 seats, and the SDP second in 102 seats.
Yes, but how many to Labour? I mean, I know for sure that the SDP has allowed the Conservatives in no end of places. For example, where Labour has come second, like Slough, Darlington, Stockport, Hayes and Harlington, Cardiff West, Erith and Burntwood, Dewsbury, for example. SDP intervention there has allowed Conservatives to increase their majority.
But look there, Mr. Varley, we have the Wrekin. Now, that's Telford New Town. That's part of the West Midlands. Unemployment so high, it's more than 20%. And yet Labour can't hold that kind of seat.
Yes, I think we've done badly. We've had difficulty in getting over the message that unemployment is going to get even worse. I think the Conservatives were successful, along with their friends in the Confederation of British Industry, to give the impression that the recession was now behind us. We were now on lift-off. Everybody knows that the government are calculating further unemployment this year. That was set out in their white paper just before the budget. And it has been difficult. I've always had a great fear right through this campaign, or right through this Parliament, quite frankly, that the British electorate, just as they did in 1935, would vote massively for the Conservatives. I'm afraid 85% of the electorate have not given a fig, really, for the 50% who have been out of a job.
We're going to have to come back to Mr. Patrick Jenkin because I think Mr. David Steele is at Ettrick after his count. Alistair Stewart's there.
Yes, indeed, Alistair. David Steele, congratulations, first of all, on a much bigger majority, I think, than you'd privately expected.
Very satisfactory, and all due to my wife.
Now, looking at the national picture, because I think we've admitted all along it was unlikely that you would have lost this, we're now predicting something like 24 seats for the Alliance, 20 of which are going to be Liberal. Is that enough to really produce some form of effective opposition?
Well, it's not enough. The millions of people who voted for us have been cheated, really, of the result that they deserved. But it's enough.